Wanted to talk about a couple of really important tips for some chainsaw safety. And we all know the eye protection, head protection, chaps are so critical. I've actually been cutting with clients before that have cut through their chaps, and I haven't cut for years with clients, but I cut for several years with clients, up to a couple dozen a year. And so I got to see a lot. People even hitting their chaps, getting gummed up so that it actually bound the saw up and they pulled their starter cord apart, trying to start it. You know, people with nicks and cuts, cutting their clothing without chaps on is so critical. The chaps are so critical to have. But wear your safety gear anytime you cut, that's critical. But when we're out here, you know, how many of you have trails out there? And this is an important area that can really present some problems. And we'll talk about this first one that happened right here. There's two different cuttings here. One was this giant log tree that had come across here, and when it did that, it bound up on a couple smaller trees and then also rode the side of this big red oak down right on the side of it right here. So when that happens, then that upper portion of that tree is bound and bowed as it rides down along there. So it creates spring poles. It creates poles that are part of those branches that have a spring in them. It created one on the ground over here where it actually bent a tree over and that whole tree was bowed. And so we'll talk about a couple of the safety features. We had Joel out here. Now I've cut for clients, tens of thousands of dollars in invoicing for cutting. I've cut for 25 years. Used to cut up to 5 cords of wood, full cords, for using to heat my house back in the day. But I'm no expert. I just have a lot of experience cutting, and fortunately I've avoided any kind of costly or dear mistakes. But Joel is someone I consider an expert. He's done it for a living. He's an expert with the saws. He's an expert with all the different types of cuts and basically getting those trees down safely. In fact, Joel's cut a lot where trees were leaning against the power lines, and he was one of those responsible for getting those trees to fall this way or this way so they didn't fall on the power lines when he cut them. So a real timber jockey when it comes to that kind of stuff. This first cut here is a dangerous cut, and a lot of times people wouldn't look at it as dangerous because it's on the ground. If you look at it, this is a pretty hefty tree, and it's got a lot of weight to it, and when it came down it was bound against this red oak over here. That's a very bad thing. It's lifted up in the air. A lot of times people want it, the trail is right here. So you just want to starting to cut right here. And the problem is imagine this giant tree is bowed. And so when you cut it and it releases, it can hit you and take out your legs, your knees, throw the saw into you. Very, very dangerous situation. Not to mention there's a lot of pressure up or down. And so you're gonna get your saw pinched. At the very least, you get your saw pinched. Most likely you get injured. So where you start is back here. And you start with a lot of those spring poles that are actually sliding against, and you start with the top of the tree. You see all the pieces that were cut out here first. And you're starting with these smaller pieces, and you can see where the bend is against the tree, and you're taking small cuts to actually release that pressure. You're never trying to release it all at one time, and you're cutting the small stuff first on your way back to the trunk and the big stuff. And there's another cut we're going to show you here, and it's the same feature there where you're working on the top of the tree where it's bound in this case, and working in small incremental cuts all the way back. And you can see when we finished with this, these cuts right here, these chunks of logs were left. So we're not cutting these all at one time, and just a smart way to do it, just in pieces all the way back. I'll tell you, one of these trees right in here was a true spring pole where it was bent down, and you're taking the saw underneath and you're just shaving it a little bit at a time, so that, and working downwards so that it starts to give slowly, not just snapping all at one time. And that's the problem with a lot of these cuts. So I hope that makes sense. This log going across, you're starting at the top end right over here. Of course, you're using all your safety gear and then going back. That's why I love having Joel out here. This is one where I get a little nervous. Jen and I cut one, I guess it was right up here a little ways last year, and we used a winch, we used a side-by-side, and we did it safely and slowly, but it took Joel, what took him a few minutes, it seemed like, to cut, with a 26-inch bar on a really hopped up steel chainsaw, it took us a lot longer to do safely. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We'll be right back. I really want you to check out our seed company, Pure Wildlife Blends. We changed the name from WHS to reflect Pure, what our seed's all about and our company's all about. Right now is a great time to be putting down our perennial, our Green Max Traffic Blend for trails and around the water holes, our switchgrass, our summer soil explosion. It's amazing what people are buying right now, even going all the way into the fall, getting all their seed available right now. We'll have it all year though, you don't have to rush. Check it out while you're at it, while you're on the website. Check out our How You Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's a great web class and some of the other ones. We have lots to offer, including the books too. Make sure you don't miss out. Now back to the video. This next cutting right here was a real dangerous one. The tree was actually, it was this tree right here. It was up and it was topped. And so the top of the tree was right over here across the trail, going up to this. Now, the temptation of that is you come over here and for one, you try to cut the trunk down. Well, that's under a lot of pressure because the top is down here, the trunk is back here. You cut the trunk out, you don't necessarily know which way it's going to go. So instead you come back here. That top was down in this range here. And what's really important is, again, you start at the top of the tree and you're cutting in small increments so it releases that top half of the tree slowly, almost walking it back in pieces, almost back to the trunk. What you do is if you cut it too fast, that tree can kick out, and this is the most dangerous cut of the two. That top half of the tree can swing back, hit that log. When it hits that log, a lot of times it wants to bounce back and the whole tree can come right over on top. So you're back here releasing that, you cut it, it swings back there, and now this tree is coming right back over you, the whole thing. And so you don't want to do that. You want to release it very slowly, cutting off a little bit at a time, mostly undercuts, so that bottom cuts, so you can actually let it stagger back. Joel got it right around into this location, and then he flipped around. Once this is cleaned up and you're really just dealing with the top, all the branches have been cut off, then he started working on the trunk. And he worked on the trunk, put a face cut in it, worked on it with wedges, and got that tree to eventually, with wedges and pounding on it, got it to fall right over here. So took care of this. You can see the whole tree here, how that was all the way up and down. This entire tree right here, this was the top of it, and you can see how all these pieces right here, a lot of them were cut off that to work on it. They're mixed in with big maple that was cut too. So between this hickory with the top and that coming off the top, it was really dangerous. Again, this is the one that makes Joel the most nervous. As someone who's an expert, he said he's had some close calls with trees like this, as opposed to these ones in the ground, he said, are a little bit more predictable. And but bottom line is, it was safe, and that's what I worry about. I worry about this with clients, worry about it with landowners in general. When you're out in the woods, it's very easy to get hit with a chainsaw and get hurt with a chainsaw, and boy, it's not pretty. I've had lots of clients with injuries on them, and most importantly, you're always wearing your safety gear, but just wearing your safety gear and having a good saw isn't the entire story. There's a lot of different types of cuts you can learn. Look up some of this online, really try to learn more than just even what I'm trying to explain right here. But really try to approach it to be as safe as possible, because you have loved ones depending on you. I always tell a story. I was with a client down in Indiana for 2 days. He had 400 acres. He wanted me to cut some bedding area with him, just to demonstrate with him, meaning he comes out, you know, where do you want me to cut? Well, why don't you go cut 200 yards over there? I'll cut here. So he left first time with a chainsaw, no chaps, no helmet, no eye protection. He was back within 5 minutes. He had camo bib overalls on. He had long johns underneath, and he was visibly shaken and nervous. He had a 22-inch bar, I think. It was on a newer Husqvarna. Never used it before. Really long bar. I usually use a 16-inch bar. It's a little ripper and it takes care of, I could have cut this tree up with that size bar. But he had a gash about 6 inches long through the bibs and through the long johns, and it didn't touch his skin. Very, very lucky. I've had another client where I'm out there with the client and his friend, and the year before they were cutting together on that same property, and the friend had a deep cut with a chainsaw across his thigh, no chaps. Went up to my client, said, I cut myself really bad. My client looks at him, no blood, said, oh, looks fine. You know, it doesn't look bad. He said, it's really bad. Look, opened up his jeans. You could see the blood starting to come in an inch deep down in the top of his thigh. Blood really starting to pour in. They actually put a belt on his leg. He got him to their truck. They had to drive about 20 minutes to a regional hospital. He passed out from shock within a few minutes before they got to the hospital. Got to the hospital, and of course I was with him that day a year later, so he survived, everything was fine. But had he been by himself, he wouldn't have made it back to the truck, they said. So I have a lot of stories. I can go on and on about this, but wear your chaps, your eye protection, your helmet, and then try to learn some of these cuts. We're just talking about some basic strategy here, but there's a lot more details that'll keep you safe in the woods and keep your friends and loved ones and family happy when you're spending time out in the woods. And on top of that, even Joel, an expert, he wants us around when he's cutting out here. Jen won't let me cut in the woods without someone else alongside of me. And Joel even he has a friend of his, it's an 8th grader, a kid that's in junior high school, and he wants to learn how to do this stuff, so he'll follow Joel around the woods too. But you always want someone out there and standing away from you so that if something happens, people know about it and you can get help right away.